Welcome to Hearths of Myths. Tonight, the fire burns low, and the shadows stretch long across the floorboards. Outside, the wind is howling against the eaves, a sound that is both lonely and ancient. It is the kind of wind that carries memories, the kind of wind that stripped the leaves from the great oak trees of primeval Europe thousands of years ago. We are traveling back to a time before maps, before the written word caged the wildness of the world, to an island shrouded in mist and mystery. We are going to the Emerald Isle, to Ireland. But not the Ireland of saints and scholars, nor the Ireland of leprechauns and clovers. We are going deeper. We are descending into the raw, brutal, and hauntingly beautiful mythology of the cycle of invasions. We are here to speak of a god who is often whispered about, but rarely understood. He is not a god of sunshine, nor a god of healing springs. He is the grandfather of nightmares. He is the husband of panic. He is the architect of the first great stone fortresses that looked out over the grey Atlantic with unblinking eyes. We are walking the path of the ancient war god, the High King of the dead. Night, close your eyes. Let the modern world dissolve. Let the walls of your room fade away into the damp, heavy mist of a peat bog. Can you smell it? The scent of wet earth, of decaying heather, of iron rusting in the rain. Can you hear the distant, rhythmic pounding of the surf against the basalt cliffs? That is the heartbeat of this story. To understand Neit, we must first understand the world that birthed him. In the cosmology of the ancient Celts, war was not merely a political act or a clash of armies. It was a spiritual condition. It was a force of nature, as inevitable and as terrifying as a thunderstorm or a landslide. It was not glorified in the way the Romans glorified discipline and conquest. Rather, it was revered as a terrifying necessity, a frenzy that possessed the soul, a red wind that blew through the minds of men and gods alike. Neit was the embodiment of this force. His very name, in the reconstruction of the Proto-Celtic language, traces back to a root that means passion, frenzy, or anger. But this was not the hot, impulsive anger of a tavern brawl. This was the cold, sustained, and lethal intensity of a being who exists solely to dismantle the order of life. He stands at the threshold of history, a figure carved from the grey stone of the north. Unlike the Tuatha Dé Danann, the tribe of the gods, who would come later with their golden hair and their arts of poetry and medicine, Neit feels older, heavier. He belongs to the Twilight era, bridging the gap between the chaotic, monstrous Fomorians who ruled the seas and the refined deities who would rule the land. He is a paradox. He is listed among the Tuatha Dé, yet his blood runs cold with the heritage of the deep ocean. He is a god of the tribe, yet his grandson, Balor of the evil eye, would become the tribe's greatest enemy. Neit sits in the middle of this cosmic web, a silent, brooding patriarch holding a spear that drips with the venom of the first serpents. Imagine him now. He is not young. The myths never paint him as a youthful hero like Lu or Cuchulainn. Neit is old, but it is the age of a mountain, not the age of a man. His skin is the texture of weathered granite, scarred by eons of conflict. His eyes are not bright like the sun. They are pale, like the winter sky, devoid of pity, devoid of fear. He wears a cloak not of woven wool, but of wolf skins, the fur matted and thick, smelling of the wild forest. On his head, he does not wear a golden crown of intricate filigree. He wears a simple helm of iron, unpolished, dark, absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. And in his hand, he holds the symbol of his power, the broad-headed spear. In the Lebor Gabala Eren, the book of the conquests of Ireland, we are told of the origins of the gods. They did not sprout from the earth. They came from the north. They came from 4 mythical cities located in the northern islands of the world: Phalias, Gorias, Murias, and Findias. These were cities of magic, of learning, and of shadow. It was there that the Tuatha Dé Danann learned their arts, and it was there, in the cold, biting winds of the polar north, that Neit forged his nature. While others learned the arts of healing or the crafting of cauldrons, Neit studied the art of breaking things. He studied the fracture points of the human spirit. He learned that victory is not won by the strength of the arm alone, but by the terror one inspires in the heart of the enemy. The genealogy of Neit places him in a position of supreme authority and primal danger. He is the son of Indue, who was the son of Aldoi, who was the son of Tat. These names roll off the tongue like stones tumbling down a scree slope, ancient, rhythmic, and hard. But it is when we look at his descendants that the true scale of his influence becomes clear. He is the father of Esarg, who in turn fathered the physician god Dian Cecht. Think of that contradiction. The god of healing springs from the loins of the god of war. It is a profound Celtic truth that destruction and regeneration are inextricably linked. You cannot heal the body until you understand how it is broken. The surgeon and the executioner share a knowledge of anatomy. Only their intent differs. Neit represents the wound. His son represents the suture. But there is a darker branch to his family tree, one that we will climb slowly and carefully as this saga unfolds. Through another line, Neit is the ancestor of the Fomorians. The Fomorians were the anti-gods, the beings of the deep sea, of blight, of drought, and of tyranny. They were the monsters that the Tuatha Dé Danann had to defeat to claim Ireland. And yet, Neit is the grandfather of Balor, the king of the Fomorians. This places Neit in a terrifyingly neutral position. He is the root from which both the heroes and the monsters grow. He is the trunk of the tree of conflict. He is the source of the war itself. When the Tuatha Dé Danann fight the Fomorians on the plains of Tuired, they are essentially fighting a civil war, a war of cousins, all descended from the same cold, grey grandfather who watches from his stone fortress, indifferent to which side bleeds, as long as the blood flows. The arrival of night in Ireland is shrouded in the famous dark clouds of the Tuatha Dé Danann. The legends say that when the gods arrived to take Ireland from the Firbolg, the previous inhabitants, they burned their ships so there could be no retreat. The smoke from the burning vessels mingled with the magical mist they conjured, creating a fog so thick it blotted out the sun for 3 days and 3 nights. Imagine standing on the shore of ancient Ireland, a member of the Firbolg, looking out at the sea. The horizon disappears. The air turns cold. The birds stop singing. And then, out of the supernatural gloom, they emerge. Not as an army of men, but as a procession of divine terrors. At the front of this host, walking through the swirling grey mists, is Neit. He does not shout. He does not beat his shield. He simply walks, and the ground shudders beneath his feet. The atmosphere around him is heavy, charged with a static electricity that raises the hair on your arms. This is the Neit, the frenzy, manifesting. To look upon him is to feel the sudden, irrational urge to flee, or the equally irrational urge to fight until death. He radiates conflict. He acts as a tuning fork for aggression, vibrating at a frequency that drives men to madness. This concept of madness is central to who Neit is. In later centuries, the Irish would speak of the warp spasm of Cuchulainn, a terrifying physical transformation caused by battle rage. But Neit is the precursor to this. He is the static state of that rage. He is the cold malice that precedes the hot violence. He is the strategist of slaughter. Unlike the Greek Ares, who is often portrayed as a hot-headed brute, or the Roman Mars, who is a disciplined soldier, Neit is something more elemental. He is closer to a force of entropy. He represents the inevitable decay of peace. Peace, in the eyes of Neit, is merely a pause between wars, a time to sharpen blades and build walls. Let us speak of the landscape he claimed. Ireland is a land of soft green hills and flowing rivers, but it is also a land of jagged rocks and desolate bogs. Neit is the god of the hard places. His name is associated with the high, rocky outcrops where the wind never stops blowing. He is the lord of the dun, the fort. Before Neit, warfare in Ireland was perhaps a series of skirmishes, of cattle raids, of open field brawls. But Neit brought the concept of the stronghold. He brought the idea of the immovable object. The construction of Aileach, which we will visit later in our journey, is a testament to this aspect of his character. He is the god who says, "This is mine. Come and take it if you dare." He introduced the psychology of the siege, the grinding, slow warfare of attrition that tests the endurance of the soul. In the silence of the pre-Christian world, the worship of Neit would not have been held in sunlit groves with flowers and mead. It would have been a grim affair. We can imagine his devotees gathering on the exposed hilltops at twilight, the time when colors fade to gray. They would bring offerings not of grain, but of iron, broken swords, bent spearheads, casting them into pits or lakes as votive gifts. They would ask not for a long life, but for a good death, a death that echoed with the sound of breaking shields. They would ask for the night, the passion, to enter their hearts so that they would not feel fear when the shield wall collapsed. To worship Neit was to accept that life is a struggle, a constant battle against the encroaching chaos, and that the only victory lies in how one faces the inevitable end. There is a linguistic ghost that Neit has left behind, a spectral footprint in the language of the Gael. The old Irish word for battle is cath, but the word for a warrior, a champion, is often linked to the root of Neit. To be a warrior was to be of Neit. It was to be possessed by him. When a young man picked up a spear for the first time, he was inviting the spirit of the old god into his hands. When a king declared war, he was invoking the grandfather of Balor. Neit was the invisible guest at every council of war, the silent observer at every duel. He was the cold breath on the back of the neck that told a soldier, "Strike now, do not hesitate." But Neit is not a solitary figure in the void. A god of war requires a context, and for Neit, that context is defined by his relationships, specifically his terrifying wives. While Neit represents the structural, almost foundational aspect of war, the strategy, the weapon, the fortress, his consorts represent the psychological horror of the battlefield. Nemain and Fea. Their names alone are enough to curdle the blood. Nemain, the spirit of panic. Fea, the hateful. As the Tuatha Dé Danann established themselves in Ireland, pushing back the Fir Bolg and laying claim to the sovereignty of the land, Neit's role was crucial. He was not the king. That role went to Nuada of the Silver Hand. But he was the anchor. Nuada was the figurehead, the shining leader who inspired hope. Neit was the enforcer, the grim reality that ensured the king's laws were obeyed. He was the darkness that allowed the light of Nuada to shine. It is often the case in mythology that the sky gods get the glory, but the chthonic, earthy, warlike gods do the heavy lifting. Neit is the bedrock of the pantheon. Without his capacity for violence, the arts and sciences of the other gods would have been swept away by the Fomorians in a single afternoon. The mythology hints that Neit ruled over a specific territory in the north of Ireland, in the lands that would become Ulster and Donegal. This is a rugged, harsh landscape, battered by the Atlantic storms. It fits him perfectly. The Giant's Causeway, with its hexagonal basalt columns, looks like something Neit might have built. An orderly, geometric, yet massive imposition of will upon the chaos of nature. When you stand on those cliffs today, looking north toward the invisible islands of Falias and Gorias, you are looking through the eyes of Neit. You are seeing the world as he saw it, a place of raw elements, of water and stone, where only the strong survive. But there is a tragedy inherent in Neit's existence, a slow-burning melancholy that permeates his story. As the grandfather of the enemy, he is destined to see his own bloodline tear itself apart. He knows, with the foresight of the immortals, that the great battle of Mag Tuired will not just be a war against strangers. It will be a war against his own kin. Every Fomorian that falls under the spear of a Tuatha Dé warrior is a distant relation. Every god that is crushed by a Fomorian club is his descendant or ally. He is the patriarch of a doomed family. Perhaps this is why he is so cold, so impassive. To let himself feel the grief of this fratricidal war would be to shatter. So he turns his heart to stone. He becomes the fortress. He locks his emotions behind the high walls of Aileach and focuses only on the purity of the fight. In the ancient texts, Neit is sometimes described as the venomous one. This is a curious epithet for a war god. Usually, venom is the domain of snakes or assassins, not warriors. But consider the nature of a wound in the Bronze Age or Iron Age. A cut from a sword was not just a laceration. It was a doorway for infection, for fever, for the slow, agonizing death that followed the battle. Venom here might refer to the inevitability of death that follows his touch. Or perhaps it refers to the poisonous nature of war itself, how it infects a society, how it lingers in the blood feud for generations. Neit does not just kill the body, he poisons the future. He ensures that the cycle of violence continues, that the son picks up the father's sword to avenge a death that happened 20 years ago. He is the infection in the wound of the world. As we prepare to walk further into his legend, we must shed our modern sensibilities. We must stop looking for good guys and bad guys. In the saga of Neit, there are only survivors and the dead. The Tuatha Dé Danann are beautiful and skilled, yes, but they are also ruthless invaders who took Ireland by force. The Fomorians are monstrous and oppressive, but they are also the original powers of the land and sea, fighting to maintain their place. Neit stands between them, the pivot point of the balance. He is the judge who casts his vote with iron. The wind is picking up outside. The fire is crackling, sending sparks up the chimney to join the stars. We have stepped onto the shores of ancient Ireland. We have met the red wind of the north. We have seen the face of the god who does not smile. But this is only the beginning. To truly understand the depth of the darkness that night commands, we must meet the women who walk beside him. We must look into the faces of panic and hatred. We must enter the domestic sphere of a god whose home is a battlefield. As the night deepens, listen to the silence. Is it truly empty, or is it filled with the waiting breath of the old gods? Night is watching, and he is patient. The stone does not rush. The war does not hurry. It simply is. And it is waiting for us to turn the page. The fire has settled into a steady, glowing bed of embers. The wind outside has not ceased. If anything, it has grown more insistent, rattling the window panes as if seeking entry. It is a fitting accompaniment for where we must go next. We have spoken of the stone, the iron, and the cold, unyielding nature of night, the grandfather of battles. We have established him as the fortress, the immovable object against which the waves of chaos break. But a fortress is merely a structure. It is silent until it is inhabited. And the house of night is not empty. It is filled with voices, with whispers, and with screams that echo through the corridors of history. To understand the full, terrifying spectrum of the Celtic war god, we must look at who walks beside him. In the ancient world, deities were rarely solitary entities. They existed in constellations, in pairs and triads that amplified their power and defined their spheres of influence. Night, for all his grim stoicism, is defined by his marriages. He is the husband of havoc. He is the consort of panic. The women who share his bed are not goddesses of fertility or hearth fire. They are the personifications of the moments when the human mind snaps under the pressure of violence. They are Nemain and Fea. Let us step into the shadow of these figures. The myths tell us that Neit had 2 wives, or perhaps 1 wife with 2 faces, or even 3, if we consider the shifting nature of the Morrigan. But the primary names associated with him in the Lebor Gabala Eren and the metrical Dinchenchas are Nemain and Fea. These are not names you would give to a child. They are words of power, words of warning. First, there is Nemain. Her name is a vibration in the air, Etymologists and scholars of the Old Irish tongue have traced her name back to roots, meaning venom, poison, or more abstractly, frenzy. But frenzy is a word that we have domesticated in the modern age. We think of a frenzy as a busy day at the market or a rush to meet a deadline. The frenzy of Nemain is something else entirely. It is the specific, blinding chaos that descends upon a battlefield when the lines break. It is the moment when a soldier, surrounded by the clash of steel and the smell of blood, loses the ability to distinguish friend from foe. It is the red mist that obscures reason. Imagine the ancient battlefield. It is not the organized, geometric warfare of the Roman legions with their distinct standards and whistles. It is a melee. It is a screaming, heaving mass of bodies in a bog or a forest clearing. In this environment, communication is impossible. Fear is contagious. Panic spreads like a virus. This is the domain of Nemain. She does not carry a sword. She does not need one. Her weapon is her voice. The myths speak of the shriek of Nemain. It is a sound that is said to be heard above the roar of the ocean and the thunder of the sky. When Nemain shrieks, the bravest warriors drop their weapons and cover their ears. Horses rear and throw their riders. The discipline of the army evaporates. There is a terrifying story buried in the Tuired Dé Danann, the great cattle raid saga, where Nemain appears. It is said that she shrieked over the camp of the armies of Queen Medb. The sound was so piercing, so laden with supernatural dread, that 100 warriors died of sheer terror in a single night. They did not die from a spear thrust or an arrow. Their hearts simply stopped. Their minds shattered. This is the power of Neit's wife. Neit represents the physical reality of the war, the blow that kills. Nemain represents the psychological reality, the fear that kills before the blow even lands. She is the embodiment of PTSD, of the trauma that lingers in the air long after the fighting has stopped. She is often described as a washer at the ford, a grim figure stooped over the water, scrubbing the blood-stained clothes of those who are about to die. This links her inextricably to the Morrigan, the great queen, the phantom queen of Irish mythology. In fact, many texts use the names interchangeably, or suggest that Nemain is one of the three sisters of the Morrigan, alongside Badab and Macha. Whether she is a sister or a distinct entity, her function in the House of Neit is clear. She creates the confusion that Neit exploits. She sows the seeds of disorder, and Neit, the grim reaper, harvests the crop. Now, consider the dynamic of their union. Neit is the venomous one, the stoic, harsh grandfather. Nemain is the frantic, shrieking spirit of panic. Together, they form a perfect, horrifying whole. War requires both. You need the cold, strategic calculation of Neit to plan the campaign, to build the forts, to forge the weapons. But you also need the wild, uncontrollable energy of Nemain to drive men to acts of desperate violence. Without Nemain, war would just be a chess match. With her, it becomes a slaughter. They are the venomous couple, a duality of malice that presided over the fate of Ireland for centuries. But Nemain is not alone in the house of Neit. There is another, a figure perhaps even more unsettling because she is quieter, more insidious. Her name is Fea. Fea. The name is short, sharp, like the snap of a twig in a silent forest. It translates, quite literally, to the hateful one, or simply hatred. If Nemain is the hot flash of panic, Fea is the cold, simmering resentment that leads to war in the first place. She is the grudge. She is the blood feud that lasts for 7 generations. She is the look in the eye of a conquered king who is plotting his revenge. Fea is described as the daughter of Elkmar, a mysterious figure often associated with the Brugh na Boyne, the great passage tombs of the Boyne Valley. This gives her a connection to the magic of the earth, to the dark places underground. While Nemain flies over the battlefield as a scald crow, shrieking and diving, Fea stands still. She watches. She is the sullen presence at the feast. She is the whispered insult that starts a brawl. In the mythology of Neit, Fea represents the motivation for conflict. Why do men fight? Why do gods go to war? Because of Fea, because of hatred, because of the inability to forgive. There is a fascinating and obscure legend about her death, or rather, her transformation. It is said that Fea fell dead of shame, or perhaps of grief, at the sight of a battle. But in the landscape of Ireland, she did not disappear. She became the land itself. A plain in County Carlow is named Mag Fea, the Plain of Fea. This is a common trope in Celtic mythology, the goddess becoming the sovereignty of the earth. But with Fea, it takes on a darker tone. The land is not just soil and grass. It is imbued with her nature. It is a hateful plain, a place where the earth remembers the blood that was spilled on it. It suggests that the land of Ireland itself holds the memory of conflict, that the soil is steeped in the essence of Neit's wife. So we have the triad: Neit, the force of war; Nemain, the panic of war; and Fea, the hatred of war. Imagine the domestic life of such a family. It is a strange thing to contemplate the home life of gods, but in the Irish myths, the deities are strikingly human in their habits. They eat, they drink, they marry, they quarrel. Imagine the great hall of Neit, perhaps within the stone ring of Aileach. The fire is roaring. Neit sits at the head of the table, silent, carving a piece of meat with a dagger that has seen 1,000 battles. On his right sits Nemain, her eyes darting around the room, her movements jerky and bird-like, vibrating with a nervous energy that makes the very air feel thin. On his left sits Fair, dark-haired, pale, staring into the flames with a brooding intensity, nursing a goblet of wine as if it were a grievance. This is not a happy house. It is a house of tension. It is a house where peace is impossible because the nature of its inhabitants is fundamentally opposed to tranquility. And yet there is a loyalty there. The texts say that Neit and his wives fought together. They died together. In the second battle of Mag Tuired, which we will reach in time, the fate of this dark family is sealed as one unit. They are bound by the very destruction they unleash. We must also speak of the animal avatars of these goddesses, for in the Celtic world, the divine often wears the skin of the beast. The most famous form is the crow, the deity. The hooded crow, with its grey body and black head, is a carrion bird. It eats the dead. In ancient Ireland, to see a crow perched on a roof was an omen. To see a crow walking on a battlefield was to see the goddess walking among her harvest. Nemain and the Bad Balor, often used as a title for the war fury, are the scavengers. They do not hunt, they collect. This adds a layer of revulsion to their myth. They profit from the slaughter. They are the ones who pick the eyes out of the fallen kings. Night knocks them down. His wives clean the bones. This imagery was so potent that even thousands of years later, the folklore of Ireland and Scotland is filled with washerwomen and banshees, Bianshia, woman of the fairy mound. The banshee, who screams to foretell a death, is a direct descendant of Nemain. The high-pitched keening of the banshee is the echo of Nemain's battlefield shriek. When a modern Irish person tells a story of hearing the banshee wail before a family tragedy, they are unknowingly invoking the wife of Neit. They are hearing the voice of the Bronze Age war goddess echoing through the corridors of time. Why did the ancients worship such terrifying beings? It seems counterintuitive. We like to think of religion as a source of comfort, of benevolent gods who bring rain and health. But the Celts were realists. They knew that the world was full of horror. To ignore the horror was to be consumed by it. By naming Nemain, by giving panic a face and a personality, they hoped to control it. They worshipped her not out of love, but out of apotropaic magic, the magic of turning away evil. You offer a sacrifice to Nemain so that she does not visit you. You pray to Fair so that hatred does not take root in your heart. You acknowledge Neit so that he lends you his strength when the inevitable fight comes, but you do not invite him to dinner. There is a concept in anthropology called the liminal space, the threshold between two states. War is the ultimate liminal space. It is the boundary between life and death, between civilization and savagery. Neit and his brides are the guardians of this threshold. They stand in the doorway. When a warrior paints his face with woad, the blue dye, and spikes his hair with lime, he is stepping out of the human world and into their domain. He is becoming a fionn, a wild one. He is shedding his humanity to become a vessel for night. And in that state, he is vulnerable to Nemain. If his will falters, she enters his mind. If his discipline breaks, she takes him. The relationship between Neit and the Morrigan is also worth exploring deeper here. While some texts separate them, others blur the lines. The Morrigan is often called the Great Queen, and she is a shapeshifter who mates with the Dagda, the good god and father figure of the pantheon. But her destructive aspect is pure Neit. It is possible that in the earliest, most primordial layer of the myth, Neit and the Dagda were two sides of the same coin. The Dagda representing the life-giving, abundant, club-wielding power, and Neit representing the life-taking, spear-wielding power. Their wives, the Morrigan and Nemain, are the bridges between them. The Morrigan brings victory, often to the Dagda's side, while Nemain brings the cost of that victory. Let us return to the landscape. Imagine walking through the dense forests of ancient Ulster. The trees are ancient oaks and yews. The air is damp. You come across a clearing where a battle was fought a year ago. The bones have been buried or scattered by wolves. The grass has grown back, greener and taller than before, fed by the iron and blood in the soil. But the feeling remains. The birds do not sing in this clearing. The air feels heavy, watchful. This is the presence of Fea. The hatred has settled into the soil. It is said that in such places, the sod of death awaits. If you step on a certain patch of grass, you will be seized by a hunger or a madness that cannot be cured. This is the lingering curse of the war goddesses. They do not leave when the armies march away. They stay. They haunt. The sexuality of these goddesses is another potent, if disturbing, theme. In many sovereignty myths, the king must marry the goddess of the land to ensure prosperity. Usually, she appears as a beautiful woman who offers a drink. But the war goddesses offer a different kind of union. They offer glory, but the price is blood. To mate with Nemain is to give oneself over to the frenzy of slaughter. It is an ecstatic, terrifying union where the ego is destroyed. The warrior who is beloved of Neit is the one who dies young in a blaze of violence, taken by the goddess into the other world. There is a dark eroticism in the ancient texts regarding war. Swords are kissing, spears are biting. The battle is a dance. Neit and his brides preside over this macabre dance. As we move deeper into the saga of Neit, we must carry the image of these women with us. They are not merely background characters or damsels to be rescued. They are the driving force. Neit might build the fortress, but Nemain is the reason the fortress needs to be built. Neit might forge the spear, but fair is the reason the spear needs to be thrown. They are the motivation. They are the why of war. And they are mothers, in a sense, not of human children, but of monsters. The lineage of Neit leads to the Fomorians, the sea giants. The darkness that sits in the heart of Nemain is the same darkness that will eventually manifest in the eye of Balor. The panic she inspires is the precursor to the destructive power of her grandson. The hatred of Fea is the seed of the tyranny of Bress. The family traits are passed down. The venom remains in the bloodline. We are now standing at the edge of the history of the Tuatha Dé Danann. We have met the patriarch and the matriarchs of the war. We understand the forces at play. But where did they live? Where was the seat of this dark power? It was not in a wooden hut. It was in a structure that defied the ages, a structure of stone that mirrored the soul of its builder. The wind that howls around the corners of our imaginary hearth has shifted. It is no longer the shrieking gale of panic that belongs to Nemain, nor the low, moaning draught of hatred that trails behind Fea. It is a steady, biting, high-altitude wind. It is the kind of air that fills the lungs with ice and clarity. We are leaving the abstract realms of psychology and emotion for a moment. We are planting our feet on solid ground. But this ground is not soft earth. It is rock. It is the grey, unyielding schist and quartzite of the north. We are travelling to the Grianan of Aileach. In the modern world, if you drive through the twisting roads of County Donegal, up onto the Inishowen Peninsula, you will see it. It sits on the crown of a hill called Grianan Mountain, 800 feet above the sea. From a distance, it looks like a stone crown placed upon the brow of the earth. It is a ring fort, a massive circular wall of dry stone standing against the skyline, commanding a view that stretches for miles in every direction. To the tourists, it is a ruin, a photo opportunity. But to us, walking the path of the myths, it is the house of Neit. It is the Aileach Neit, the stone house of the war god. Let us climb that hill together in our minds. The grass is short here, bitten down by sheep and the relentless Atlantic weather. The air smells of salt and heather. As you reach the summit, the world opens up. To the west lies Lough Swilly, the Lake of Shadows, a deep fjord that cuts into the land like a dark wound. To the east lies Lough Foyle, a broad expanse of water that separates the peninsula from the rest of the north. And there, in the center of this panoramic dominance, stands the fortress. The walls are 5 meters thick, 5 meters of stone stacked without mortar, holding together through the sheer force of gravity and friction for thousands of years. This is not a palace for leisure. This is a statement. It says, "I am here, I am watching, and I cannot be moved." This structure is the physical manifestation of Neit's soul. Just as he is the immovable ancestor in the genealogy of the gods, his home is the immovable anchor in the landscape of Ireland. The name itself, Grianan of Aileach, is a paradox that demands our attention. Grianan means sunny spot or solarium. It implies light, warmth, a place where the sun rests. But Aileach is derived from Ail, meaning rock or stone, so it is the sunny stone fortress. Why would a god of war, a god of venom and battles, live in a place named for the sun? Perhaps it is because war, in the ancient Celtic mind, was not done in the dark. It was a high, bright, terrible thing. It was the flashing of bronze swords under the midday sky, or perhaps, more practically, it is because this hill catches the first and last light of the day. Neit, the watcher, sees the sun rise over the foil and set over the swilly. He sees everything. But the origins of this fortress go deeper than just a strategic outpost. The Dinshenchas, the lore of places, tells us a story of grief, betrayal, and construction that links Neit to the very heart of the Tuatha Dé Danann. The legend says that this place was originally built not just as a fort, but as a grave. The story involves the Dagda, the good god, the father figure of the pantheon who wields the club of life and death. The Dagda had a son named Tuired. Now, Tuired is a name that means fire. He was a young god, perhaps rash, perhaps burning with the same intensity as his name. But Tuired made a mistake. He fell in love with, or perhaps seduced, the wife of a man named Coran. Coran was not a god, but he was a man of high status, a hospitaller or a landholder. The affair was discovered, and in the brutal justice of the mythical age, Tuired was killed. The Dagda, consumed by grief for his fiery son, brought the body to this hill. Why here? Because this was the territory of Neit. Neit and the Dagda are often linked as brothers or close kin. Two pillars of the Tuatha Dé, one representing abundance and magic, the other representing war and conflict. The Dagda carried the body of Tuired to the summit of Grianan mountain. He buried him there, in the cold earth, high above the world. But a simple grave was not enough for the son of the All-Father. The Dagda wanted to protect the dead. He wanted to ensure that no one would ever disturb the rest of Tuired. So he called upon the builders. he called upon the strength of the gods. The myth says that he ordered the stones to be brought. "Let a stone be brought by every man," the Dagda commanded. And so the hosts of the Tuatha Dé Danann, and perhaps the people of Ireland themselves, began the labor. Imagine the scene. Thousands of figures, human and divine, trudging up the steep slopes of the hill. Each one carries a stone. Some carry small rocks, jagged pieces of quartz that sparkle in the rain. Others, the giants and the strong men, carry massive slabs of grey schist on their backs. They pile them up around the grave, circle upon circle, layer upon layer. The wall rises. It encloses the dead. It creates a sacred space, a temenos, separated from the profane world outside. The Dagda stood in the center, watching the walls rise, his great club resting on the ground. He spoke a prophecy, or perhaps a curse. He declared that this place would be the Aileach, the stone house, and that it would stand forever. And though it was built around the grief of the Dagda, it became the seat of Neit. Why? Because Neit is the guardian of the dead. Neit is the god of the good death. It is fitting that the fortress of the war god is built upon the grave of the fire god. War and fire, stone and grief. These are the elements that make up the foundation of Grianan. As the centuries turned, the fortress became more than a tomb. It became the royal seat of the northern Nemain, the dynasty that would rule Ulster for 1,000 years. But in the mythological time frame, it was Neit's personal domain. Imagine him walking the ramparts. He is wearing his cloak of wolf fur, the wind whipping it around his iron-clad legs. He walks the circumference of the wall, his hand running along the rough, cold stones. He looks out over the loughs. To the north, the ocean stretches out toward the unknown. Neit knows that out there, somewhere in the mist, live his other family, the Fomorians, the sea monsters. He can smell them on the wind. He knows that one day they will come. He knows that his grandson, Balor, is growing in power on Tuired Island, far off the coast. The fortress of Aileach is not just a home. It is a watchtower. Neit is the sentinel who waits for the inevitable betrayal of his own blood. The architecture of the Grianan offers us clues to the mind of Neit. The interior of the fort is terraced. There are stone steps built into the walls, leading up to walkways. This allows defenders to stand at different heights, to hurl spears and sling stones at attackers. It is a machine of war. It is designed for efficiency. There are no ornamental carvings here, no spirals or triscales like at New Grange. New Grange is a temple to the sun and the ancestors, a place of spiritual rebirth. Aileach is a place of defense. It is austere. It is brutal. It reflects the personality of a god, who has no time for art, only for survival. And yet, there is a beauty in it. The perfect circle. The circle is a symbol of eternity, of the cycle of life and death, of the sun itself. By building his house as a circle, Neit is aligning himself with the cosmic order. He is saying that war is not an aberration. It is part of the cycle. Just as the sun rises and sets, just as the seasons turn, so too does war return. The peace is broken, the battle is fought, the dead are buried, and the fortress is rebuilt. It is an endless loop, a ring of stone that can never be broken. The acoustics inside the fort are remarkable. If you stand in the center and speak, your voice is amplified by the stone walls. It echoes. Imagine Neit holding court here. He does not need to shout to be heard by his warriors. He speaks in a low, gravelly voice, and the walls carry his commands to every ear. Prepare the spears. Sharpen the swords. The Fomorians are coming. The fort amplifies the will of the god. There is another legend associated with the Grianan, one that connects it to the sovereignty of Ireland. It is said that beneath the hill there is a sleeping army, the horsemen of the Shay. They are waiting for the day when Ireland needs them most. This trope of the king under the mountain is common in folklore, but here it takes on a specific resonance. These are Neit's warriors. They are the spirits of the old tribes, waiting in the dark, preserved by the stone, ready to ride out when the war god calls them. It suggests that Aileach is not just a ruin, it is a dormant volcano of violence. The potential for war is always there, sleeping just beneath the grass. The Loughs were the highways of the ancient world. Ships would sail up the Foyle and the Swilly, bringing trade, bringing news, bringing invaders. Neit, sitting in his high tower, controls these waterways. He is the gatekeeper of the north. Nothing enters or leaves Ulster without his knowledge. This geographical dominance is crucial to understanding why Neit is considered the High King of the Dead. In Celtic belief, the islands to the north and west were often associated with the other world, the land of the dead. Tech Duin, the House of Don, is the gathering place of souls off the coast. Neit, looking out over the western ocean, is looking toward the land of the dead. He stands on the threshold. He is the psychopomp who guides the souls of the slain warriors from the battlefield of the earth to the eternal battlefield of the other world. Aileach is the departure lounge for the honored dead. But what of his domestic life within these walls? We spoke of Nemain and Fair. Imagine them here. Nemain perching on the highest stone of the rampart, screeching at the incoming storms, her hair flying wild in the gale. She feeds off the anticipation of the attack. Fair, lurking in the shadows of the tunneled entrance, the dark passage that leads into the heart of the fort. She guards the gate with a sullen silence. If a guest arrives with hatred in their heart, Fea knows. She welcomes them. If a guest comes with peace, she makes them uncomfortable, filling their minds with old grievances until they leave or draw their weapons. The Grianan of Aileach is also a place of the sun, and the sun in Celtic mythology is often feminine. Grian is a sun goddess. Perhaps the fortress was built on a site sacred to her. This adds another layer of tension. The masculine, cold, stony war god occupying the high, sunny hill of the goddess. It is a conquest. Neit has taken the highest point, the brightest point, and turned it into a fortress. He has militarized the sun. He has turned the life-giving light into a spotlight for his enemies. In the later cycles, the fortress would be destroyed. In the 12th century AD, a king of Munster marched north and dismantled Aileach stone by stone, ordering each of his soldiers to carry a stone back to the south of Ireland. But in the time of night, it is impregnable. It is the center of the world. It is the axle upon which the wheel of conflict turns. Stand there now, in your mind's eye. The sun is setting over Lough Swilly. The water turns a deep, bruised purple. The sky is streaked with red, the color of blood, the color of the red wind. The stones of the fort glow with a faint, dying heat. You are alone with the god. He is standing beside you, though you cannot see him. You can smell the iron of his armor and the age of his skin. He is looking at the horizon, his eyes narrowed. He is not looking at the sunset. He is looking at the shadows gathering on the water. He knows what is coming. He knows that the peace of the Tuatha Dé Danann is fragile. He knows that his own bloodline, the chaotic seed he planted in the Fomorian race, is about to bear fruit. The grandfather is watching his grandchildren prepare for war. And the most terrifying of all those grandchildren is waiting on an island just beyond the horizon. A giant with a single eye that burns like a poisonous star. Balor. The stone walls of Aileach are strong, but are they strong enough to withstand the gaze of the evil eye? Neit knows the answer. He built the walls not to keep Balor out, but to have a place to stand when the world ends. The wind drops. The silence of the stone returns. We leave the Grianan of Aileach now, the great ring on the hill, and we descend into the darker, murkier waters of genealogy. We must trace the bloodline. We must understand how the god of war became the grandfather of the god of destruction. We must open the book of the Fomorians. The fire in our hearth is burning low again. Pull your chair closer. The story is about to turn from the landscape of stone to the landscape of flesh and blood. And in the family of Neit, blood is the most dangerous element of all. The shadows in the corners of the room have deepened. The firelight flickers, casting strange, elongated shapes against the walls. Shapes that look like twisted limbs, or perhaps the fins of great sea creatures. We have stood on the high, wind-swept ramparts of Aileach. We have felt the solidity of the stone and the strategic mind of Neit. But now, we must leave the safety of the fortress. We must descend from the high ground and walk down to the shoreline, to the place where the grey waves lick the black rocks. We must look out into the deep ocean, for that is where the true horror of Neit's legacy resides. In the intricate and often contradictory genealogies of Irish mythology, lineage is destiny. To be born of a certain line is to inherit a fate that cannot be outrun. And Neit, the grim war god of the Tuatha Dé Danann, carries a secret in his blood. He is not merely a hero of the gods. He is the patriarch of monsters. He is the bridge between the ordered world of the land and the chaotic world of the sea. He is the grandfather of Balor. To understand the weight of this connection, we must first speak of the Fomorians. In the earliest layers of myth, the Fomorians, Fomor, are the anti-gods. They are the beings who were here before. They are associated with the deep sea, with the destructive powers of nature, with blight, drought, and winter. They are often described as misshapen, some with one arm, some with the heads of goats, some towering giants of scale and slime. They represent the untamed, hostile universe that seeks to swallow humanity whole. And yet, the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Fomorians are not alien species to one another. They intermarry. They share blood. And the nexus of this blood-sharing is Neit. The genealogy is stark. Neit had a son named Dot. Dot is a shadowy figure, barely mentioned in the texts, a link in the chain. But Dot had a son, and that son was Balor. This means that Neit, the war god who stands beside Nuada and the Dagda, looks into the face of the Fomorian tyrant Balor and sees his own grandson. Imagine the complexity of Neit's existence. He sits in his high fortress at Aileach, sharpening his spear. He is sworn to defend the Tuatha Dé Danann. He is one of their chieftains. But the enemy he is preparing to fight is his own flesh and blood. This is not a simple war of good versus evil. It is a family feud played out on a cosmic scale. It suggests that the capacity for monstrous destruction, the Balor nature, comes directly from Neit. The grandfather provided the spark. The grandson became the forest fire. Who is Balor? He is the ultimate weapon of the ancient world. He is a giant, a king of the Fomorians who rules from Tor Mor, the great tower on Tory Island. He is known by many names: Balor of the piercing eye, Balor of the smiting blow. but he is best known for his eye. One of his eyes is always closed. The lid is so heavy that it takes 4 men using hooks and pulleys to lift it open. Why? Because the eye is poison. It is death incarnate. When Balor opens his eye, anything he looks upon is destroyed. If he looks at a bird, it falls dead from the sky. If he looks at a tree, it withers and turns to ash. If he looks at an army, the soldiers burn in their armor. It is a weapon of mass destruction, a focused beam of pure entropy. Now, trace this back to Neit. We spoke earlier of Neit's wife, Nemain, Panic, and his epithet, the Venomous One. Is Balor's eye not the ultimate expression of this venom? Neit embodies the spirit of war, the frenzy, the malice. Balor embodies the result of war, total annihilation. The grandfather is the intent. The grandson is the execution. The lineage is a progression of violence, refining itself from the broad, chaotic warfare of Neit into the singular, focused gaze of Balor. There is a tension here that vibrates through the mythology. Neit is technically on the side of the Tuatha Dé, the gods of art, civilization, and light. Yet his DNA is the blueprint for the god of darkness and chaos. Does Neit feel shame? Does he feel pride? The myths are silent on his internal thoughts, which makes him an all the more terrifying. He is the silent observer. He watches Balor grow strong on the dark island. He watches the Fomorians oppress Ireland, demanding tributes of milk, grain, and children. And he does nothing to stop it. Yet. Perhaps Neit understands that this conflict is necessary. In the Celtic worldview, balance is maintained through struggle. The summer cannot exist without the winter. The Tuatha Dé cannot shine without the Fomorians to provide the darkness. Neit, standing in the middle, accepts this. He knows that his grandson must exist so that a hero can rise to defeat him. He knows that without Balor, there is no need for Luke. Let us look at the other side of the family. Neit is also the ancestor of the Tuatha Dé Danann heroes. Through his other sons and descendants, he is linked to the champions of light. So, when the two armies eventually meet on the plain of towers, Mag Tuired, Neit is effectively fighting himself. He is the root of both armies. He is the source of the conflict itself. He is not just a participant. He is the board upon which the game is played. This casts Neit in a tragic, almost Shakespearean light. He is the old patriarch who has lived too long. He has seen the ages turn from the primal chaos to the ordered rule of kings, and now he sees the world sliding back into war. He knows that no matter who wins, he loses. If the Tuatha Dé win, his grandson Balor dies. If the Fomorians win, his tribe and his fortress fall. But Neit is a war god. He does not seek a happy ending. He seeks the kath, the battle. He seeks the resolution that comes only through violence. Consider the relationship between Balor and Neit. Did the young Balor visit his grandfather at Aileach? Did the old war god teach the young giant the arts of the spear? Did Neit look into the child's eye and see the poison gathering there? It is a chilling thought. The grandfather nurturing the monster, knowing full well what he would become. Perhaps Neit gave Balor his first lessons in hatred, passing on the teachings of his wife, Fea. "Hate them," he might have whispered. "Hate the light, hate the weak. Let your eye burn them all." Or perhaps they were estranged. Perhaps Balor, with his Fomorian blood, rejected the more civilized ways of Neit. The Fomorians are creatures of the wild sea, while Neit is a creature of the stone fort. One is fluid and chaotic. The other is rigid and structured. There is a fundamental clash of elements. Neit builds walls, Balor crumbles them. Neit is the shield of the north. Balor is the hammer of the deep. The shadow of the Fomorians hangs heavy over Neit. It makes him suspect in the eyes of the other gods. When Nuada calls a council, does he look at Neit with trust or with a sliver of doubt? Is he with us, or is he with his grandson? Neit never defends himself. He never proclaims his loyalty with flowery speeches. He simply stands there, his hand on his sword, his face like flint. His loyalty is proven not by words, but by the fact that he stands on the wall when the enemy comes. He fights his own blood because duty is stronger than kinship. That is the harsh code of the ancient warrior. There is also a deeper mythological resonance here regarding the succession of generations. In Greek myth, Cronus eats his children, and Zeus overthrows his father. In Irish myth, the conflict is often between the maternal and paternal lines, or between grandfather and grandson. Balor is eventually killed by his own grandson, Lugh. Neit is the great-grandfather of Lugh, through complex intermarriages. So Neit is the ancestor of the ultimate hero, Lugh, and the ultimate villain, Balor. Lugh is the master of all arts, the Samil Danach. He represents the perfection of skill, the light of the sun, the order of civilization. Balor represents the destruction of all things, the chaotic eye, the void. And Neit? Neit is the raw, unrefined force that precedes them both. He is the raw material. He is the violence before it is shaped into skill. Lugh or malice, Balor. He is the primal violence. When we look at Neit, we are looking at the evolution of the concept of war. In the beginning, there was just Neit, struggle, passion, survival. Then the lineage split. The destructive, hateful aspect went into Balor. The heroic, skillful, protective aspect went into Lug and the other Tuatha Dé. Neit contains both potentials. He is the grey area. This ambiguity makes him dangerous to invoke. When a warrior prays to Neit, he does not know which aspect will answer. Will he get the heroic strength to defend his home, or will he get the blind, destructive rage of Balor that kills friend and foe alike? The red wind of night blows both ways. As the saga moves toward the great wars, the shadow of the Fomorians grows longer. The tithes are collected. The people of Ireland groan under the oppression of the sea giants. The Tuatha Dé Danann are humiliated. Bres, the half-Fomorian king who replaced Nuada for a time, rules with a fist of iron, starving the gods, forcing the great Dagda to dig ditches. Where is Neit during this time? Is he hiding in Aileach? Is he brooding? No. He is waiting. He knows that the pressure must build before the explosion. He knows that the humiliation is the whetstone that sharpens the blade of rebellion. He watches the suffering of his people, and his wife Fair feeds the hatred in his heart. The Fomorians may be his kin, but they have broken the laws of hospitality. They have dishonored the land, and for Neit, honor, grim, bloody, iron-hard honor, is the only law that matters. The grandfather is preparing to kill the grandson. The stage is being set for the first battle of Tuired. The mist is clearing from the sea, revealing the ships of the enemy. Or perhaps, in this case, the ships of the Fir Bolg are the first test. Before the family feud, there is a war for territory, a war to claim the island itself. The fire has burned down to a deep, pulsating red, the color of a wound that refuses to heal. The wind outside has shifted direction, coming now from the west, carrying the damp, metallic scent of the Atlantic. We have spent the night tracing the lineage of the war god, examining the stone walls of his fortress, and whispering the names of his terrifying brides. We have looked into the abyss of his family tree, and seen the monster waiting there. But now, the waiting is over. The time for genealogy and architecture has passed. The time for the Cath, the battle, has arrived. We are standing on the precipice of the first battle of Tuired. This is the conflict that defined the ownership of Ireland. It is the clash between the old, earthen powers and the new, shining gods of art and skill. It is the moment when the Tuatha Dé Danann stepped out of the mist and into history. And standing at the prow of this invasion, silent and terrible, was Neit. The arrival of the Tuatha Dé Danann is one of the most evocative scenes in all of mythology. The Lebor Gabala Eren tells us they came in dark clouds. Some say they arrived on the wind itself, having learned the art of flight in the northern islands. Others say they came in ships, vast fleets of oak and pine, but upon landing on the coast of Connaught, they burned their vessels. Imagine the scene. The beach is crowded with gods. Nuada is there, his sword of light at his hip. The Dagda is there, his massive club resting on his shoulder. And Neit is there, his iron armor dull and grey, absorbing the light. Behind them, the ships are burning. The smoke rises in thick, choking columns, mingling with the magical mist, the Fethfiada, that they have conjured to hide their numbers. They are cutting off their retreat. There is no going back to the Northern Isles. There is only victory or death. This is a tactic that Neit would approve of. It removes the option of cowardice. It forces the Knight, the frenzy, to take hold. When the fire is at your back, the only way is forward, through the enemy. The enemy in this case is the Fir Bolg. They are the men of the Bags, the Belgic men, the current rulers of Ireland. They are not monsters like the Fomorians. They are men. They are sturdy, heavy, tied to the soil. They represent the physical, laborious aspect of the land. They are the farmers, the diggers of ditches, the builders of earthen mounds. They are strong, but they lack the divine spark, the Dawn art/skill of the invaders. The collision of these two forces is inevitable. But in the Celtic world, war is a ritual. It is not a sudden, chaotic brawl, at least not at first. It begins with a meeting, a parley. The texts tell us that the Fir Bolg sent out a champion named Shreng. The Tuatha Dé sent out Bress, the beautiful half-Fomorian prince who would later cause so much trouble. They met in a narrow pass. They did not fight. They looked at each other's weapons. Shreng looked at the spears of the Tuatha Dé. They were light, sharp, with thin shafts and long tapering points. They were designed for speed, for piercing, for the sudden, fatal thrust. Bress looked at the weapons of the Fir Bolg. They were heavy, broad, with thick handles and blunt, crushing heads. They were designed for hacking, for bludgeoning, for the slow, grinding work of slaughter. Neit, watching from the ridge, would have understood this contrast perfectly. He represents the synthesis of both. He is the grandfather of the Fomorians, heavy, chaotic, but a chieftain of the Tuatha Dé, light, skillful. He sees the lethality in the Tuatha Dé's precision, but he also respects the sheer, brute force of the Fir Bolg. He knows that when these two technologies of death meet, the ground will shake. The ambassadors exchanged weapons and returned to their camps. The intelligence was gathered. The stage was set. The battle took place on the plain of Mag Tuired, near Cong in County Mayo. It was the height of summer. The grass was long and green, soon to be stained red. The armies drew up in lines. The Tuatha Dé, shining with their magic, their cloaks of many colors fluttering in the breeze. The Firbolg, dark and sullen, a wall of shields and heavy spears. And then, the sound. The clash of the first battle of Mag Tuired was not just the sound of metal on metal. It was the sound of ideologies colliding. Neit, as the god of war, is the conductor of this orchestra. He does not sit on a throne. He is in the thick of it. He is the spirit that moves the arm of the spearman. When a Tuatha Dé warrior throws his gai, spear, it is Neit who guides its flight. When a Firbolg warrior smashes his shield into a face, it is the raw aggression of Neit that powers the blow. But where are his wives? Where are the brides of havoc? They are overhead. Nemain is there. She is the shriek in the wind. As the lines meet, as the first blood is drawn, Nemain descends. She screams over the heads of the Firbolg. The text says that the Firbolg were terrified by the sorceries of the Tuatha Dé. This sorcery was fear. It was the panic that turns a disciplined shield wall into a mob. Men looked at their comrades and saw strangers. They looked at the mist and saw monsters. Nemain wove hallucinations into the air, while Fea, the hateful, walked among the ranks, whispering old grudges, ensuring that no quarter was asked and none was given. The battle lasted for 4 days. 4 days of grinding attrition. We see the influence of Neit in the specific brutality of the descriptions. This was not a heroic duel of champions. It was a massacre. The Tuatha Dé, despite their magic, were pushed back. The Firbolg were stronger than they expected. Their heavy spears smashed the light shields of the gods. The ground became a slurry of mud and blood. Neit, the venomous one, thrives in this environment. This is his church. The smell of the battlefield, the copper scent of blood, the bowels loosening in death, the sweat of 10,000 men, is incense to him. He moves through the chaos like a shark through water. He is not fighting for territory. He is fighting because fighting is what he is. He is the entropy that breaks down the order of the Firbolg to make way for the new order of the Tuatha Dé. And then, the pivotal moment. The moment that would define the future of the gods. The High King, Nuada, found himself face to face with Sreng, the champion of the Firbolg. Nuada was the shining light of his people. He wielded the sword of light, the Claiom Solaris, one of the 4 treasures of the Tuatha Dé. No one could escape it once it was drawn. But Sreng was not afraid of light. He was a man of the earth. He swung his heavy, crude sword with the force of a falling tree. The blow struck Nuada's shield. It shattered the rim. It continued through, biting into the flesh and bone of the king's arm. With a sickening crunch, Nuada's hand, his right hand, the hand that held the sovereignty, was severed. It fell to the grass, the fingers still twitching, the sword of light tumbling from its grip. The battlefield went silent. The king was maimed. In Celtic lore, a king must be physically perfect. A blemished king cannot rule. The land reflects the king. If the king is broken, the land will break. Nuada, clutching his bleeding stump, was hustled away by his bodyguards. Sreng stood triumphant, the blood of a god dripping from his iron blade. What did Neit think in this moment? Did he feel pity for his king? Did he rush to heal him? No. Neit is not a healer. That is the domain of his son, Dian Cecht. Neit looked at the severed hand and saw a tactical reality. The king had failed. The defense had been breached. The venom of the war had found its mark. Neit's philosophy is brutal. Weakness is punished. Even the gods are not immune to the physics of violence. If you let your guard down, you lose a hand. If you lose a hand, you lose your crown. This moment, this single sword stroke, changed everything. The Tuatha Dé Danann rallied. They fought with a desperate fury, the night fully possessing them now to avenge their king. They drove the fair Bolg back. Sreng, exhausted and outnumbered, finally called for a truce. The Fir Bolg admitted defeat. They were granted the province of Connacht to live in, while the Tuatha Dé took the rest of Ireland. Victory. But it was a victory with a bitter aftertaste. The Tuatha Dé had won the land, but they had lost their leader. Nuada was alive, but he was no longer king. He was now merely Nuada. The throne was empty. Neit, the grandfather, the strategist, saw the vacuum, and he saw who would fill it. Because Nuada could not rule, the council of the gods met to choose a successor. They needed someone strong, someone who could bridge the gap between the factions. They chose Brez the Beautiful, the son of a Tuatha Dé woman and a Fomorian king. Brez was Neit's kin. He was of the same dark, chaotic lineage. Neit saw the wheel turning. The war against the Fir Bolg was over, but the war for the soul of the Tuatha Dé was just beginning. By placing a half Fomorian on the throne, the gods had invited the enemy into their bed. They had invited the very oppression they had fled from. Neit returned to his fortress at Aileach after the battle. He washed the blood of the Fir Bolg from his spear. He watched the sun set over a conquered Ireland, but he did not celebrate. He knew that the severed hand of Nuada was an omen. It was a crack in the foundation. The first battle of Mag Tuired was a war of colonization. The Tuatha Dé were the invaders, the aggressors. They had proven their strength. They had proven that their magic was superior to the brute force of the Fir Bolg. But they had also proven that they could bleed. They could be maimed. They were not invincible. And out in the ocean, On the dark towers of Tory Island, the Fomorians were watching. Balor heard the news. "The silver hand has fallen," he might have rumbled. "The gods are weak." Neit, sitting in his stone ring, felt the shift in the wind. The red wind had not died down. It was merely taking a breath. The wives, Nemain and Fea, were not satisfied. Panic had fed, but hatred was still hungry. The Firbolg were just a meal. The main course was yet to come. The reign of Bress would be a time of misery, a time when the gods were reduced to slaves, a time when the great Ogma had to carry firewood, and the Dagda had to dig trenches. And Neit? Neit endured. He is the rock. He waits out the bad kings, just as he waits out the storms. He knew that Brez was a test of the gods' resolve. We are now moving toward the precipice of the second battle, the battle that everyone remembers, the battle where the family tears itself apart, the battle where Neit, the old war horse, will make his final stand. The fire is glowing with a strange, greenish light now. Perhaps it is the copper in the driftwood we threw on the grate. Or perhaps it is the influence of the Fomorians creeping closer. The atmosphere is heavy. Can you feel the weight of the coming doom? The embers in the hearth have turned to ash, grey and soft as the morning mist. Yet the heat remains, a deep, radiating warmth that speaks of the violence of the fire that once burned. We have witnessed the arrival. We have seen the ships burn and the Firbolg fall. We have seen the hand of the High King severed, a wound that bled sovereignty away from the Tuatha Dé Danann and into the grasp of the tyrant, Brez. Now, the wheel of the year turns to winter. The golden age of the gods has not yet begun. Instead, they are living in a long, dark shadow. We are entering the era of the second battle of Mag Tuired. This is the Götterdämmerung of the Irish pantheon. This is the moment when the grandfather meets his destiny. The reign of Brez was a time of humiliation. Brez, the beautiful but empty king, the half-Fomorian who favored his father's dark kin over his mother's tribe. Under his rule, the Tuatha Dé were reduced to servitude. The great champions were made to perform menial tasks. The hospitality of Ireland, the sacred bond between host and guest, was broken. There was no grease on the knives, no beer in the cups, no poets in the halls. It was a spiritual famine. Where was Neit during this time? The myths are quiet, which tells us everything. Neit is not a rebel. He is not a young hothead who starts an uprising in the streets. He is the establishment. He is the fortress. He likely stayed in Aileach, watching, waiting. He saw the indignity, and his wife, Fia, the hateful, whispered in his ear. "They are laughing at us," she would say. "The sea monsters are treating the gods like dogs." Neit's hatred grew, cold and hard as iron. He knew that Brez was unworthy, not because he was cruel, but because he was stingy. In the Celtic code, a king must be generous. Brez was a miser, and a miser cannot lead warriors into the Neit, the frenzy. Then came the return of Nuada, his hand restored by the physician Dian Checht, Neit's own descendant, and the smith Goibniu. Nuada of the Silver Hand reclaimed the throne. But the Fomorians did not accept this. They gathered their vast, monstrous hosts. Balor of the Evil Eye, the grandson of Neit, prepared to wipe the Tuatha Dé Danann from the face of the earth. And then came Lugh, the Ildanach, the master of all arts. He arrived at the gates of Tara, proving his worth, lighting a fire of hope in the hearts of the oppressed gods. Lugh took command. He began to prepare for the Cathmaig Tuired. This preparation was not just physical. It was magical. Lugh asked each god what power they would bring to the battle. The smith promised swords that would never break. The physician promised to heal the dead. The cupbearer promised endless water. And Neit? What did the old war god promise? He promised the slaughter. The text of the Cathmaig Tuired gives us a chilling list of the weaponry Neit prepared. It speaks of venomous spears and warlike swords. But more importantly, it speaks of the psychological warfare. Neit and his wives, Nemain and Fea, promised to fill the hearts of the Fomorians with such terror that they would break before the spears even touched them. They promised to scream. The battle gathered on the plain of Mag Tuired, a different location from the first battle, likely in Sligo. It was Samhain, the time when the veil between the worlds is thinnest. The Fomorians came out of the sea like a dark tide. Indech, the son of the goddess Domnu, led them, and Balor the destroyer. Imagine Neit standing on the ridge, looking down at the enemy host. He sees the banners of the Fomorians. He sees their twisted shapes, their giant stature, and he sees his own bloodline staring back at him. He is about to fight the forces that share his DNA. This is the ultimate test of the war god. Does he choose family, or does he choose the tribe? Neit chooses the tribe. He chooses the art of the Tuatha Dé over the chaos of the Fomorians. He chooses the structure of the fort over the wildness of the sea. The battle begins. It is difficult to describe the chaos of Mag Tuired. The text says that the river Unsen ran red with blood. It says the clash of shields was like the sound of thunder rolling in the mountains. The sky turned black. Lugh was riding the wind, casting his spear. The Dagda was wielding his club, crushing bones with every swing. But Neit was in the thick of the melee. He was not casting spells from afar. he was fighting the old way, hand to hand, spear to shield. He was a whirlwind of grey iron and wolf skin. The night possessed him fully. He was no longer a person. He was the avatar of violence. He moved with a terrifying economy of motion. Stab, twist, kill, move. Stab, twist, kill, move. And beside him were the brides. Nemain was shrieking, her voice shattering the concentration of the Fomorian champions. Fair was moving like a shadow, tripping the enemy, guiding the spears of the Tuatha Dé into the chinks of the Fomorian armor. The triad of war was operating in perfect, lethal harmony. But the Fomorians were strong. They had their own ancient powers. And in the confusion of the slaughter, Neit found himself isolated. The sources vary on the exact moment of his death. Some say he fell in the general press of bodies, but there is a poetic justice in the idea that he was confronted by the Fomorian leadership. Perhaps he came face to face with Balor, the grandfather and the grandson, the creator of the war and the destroyer of the world. Balor's eye was opening. The lid was being cranked up by his servants. The beam of destruction was beginning to glow. Neit, the fortress, stood his ground. He did not run. He knew that someone had to hold the line while Lu prepared the Tatlhu, the sling stone. Neit drove his spear into the Fomorian ranks, roaring a challenge that shook the earth. But even a god of war can bleed. The Fomorians swarmed him. Their weapons, forged in the deep pressures of the ocean trench, battered against his iron armor. The shield of Neit, which had defended the north for eons, began to splinter. And then the blow fell. Neit, the High King of the dead, was struck down. He fell to the bloody grass of Mag Tuired. The venomous one tasted his own medicine. The red wind left his lungs. As he died, the frenzy left him. The iron in his soul cooled. He looked up at the grey sky of Ireland, the sky he had watched for so long from Aileach, and he closed his eyes. But he did not die alone. The myths tell us that Nemain and Fea also fell. Whether they were slain by Fomorian blades, or whether they simply ceased to exist because their anchor was gone, we do not know. But the triad was broken. The panic and the hatred died with the warrior. Their bodies lay together on the plain, a grim family reunited in the silence of death. Their sacrifice was not in vain. Neit's stand had bought time. Luch had found his mark. The slingstone flew. It struck Balor in the eye. The eye was driven backward through his head, turning its destructive beam onto the Fomorian army behind him. The Fomorians were decimated by their own king. The tide turned. The Tuatha Dé Danann surged forward. The Fomorians were driven back into the sea, never to return as a conquering power. Ireland was saved. The sovereignty was secure. But the cost was high. Nuada was dead, beheaded by Balor. The Dagda was mortally wounded, though he would linger. And Neit was gone. The old guard had been wiped out. The generation of the builders, the generation of the primal powers, had sacrificed themselves to make way for the new generation. The generation of Lugh, the generation of light. The death of Neit marks the end of an era in Irish mythology. It is the end of the mythic war and the beginning of the heroic age. Neit took the raw, chaotic, elemental nature of war with him into the grave. After him, war became the domain of heroes like Cuchulainn, men who fought for cattle, for fame, for honor, but who were mortal. The god who was war had become part of the landscape. Imagine the aftermath of the battle. The silence that falls over the field when the screaming stops. The crows, the sisters of Nemain, descending to feast. The survivors walking among the dead, turning over bodies, looking for their kin. They find Neit. He looks smaller in death. Without the frenzy to animate him, he is just an old man in battered armor. They lift him up. They do not burn him like a common soldier. They carry him. Perhaps they carried him back to the north, back to Aileach, to bury him under the stones he raised. Or perhaps they buried him there on the plain, raising a great cairn over his body. The Cairn Ui Neit, the cairn of Neit's grandson, Balor, is a name that echoes in the landscape. But Neit himself is everywhere. Every stone fortress, every iron spearhead found in a bog, every sudden gust of panic on a dark night is a memorial to him. Neit died so that civilization could live. He was the necessary monster. He was the violence that protects the peace. He was the grandfather who had to die so the grandchildren could inherit the earth. The fire is almost out now. The room is cold. The ghosts of Mag Tuired are fading back into the mist. We have seen the death of a god. It is a heavy thing to witness, but the story does not end with death. In the Celtic world, death is just a transition. Neit does not disappear. He changes. He becomes a ghost in the landscape. He becomes the whisper in the language. In the final chapter of our saga, we will look at the legacy of Neit. We will see how his name survived in the words of the Irish people. We will visit the fairy mounds where the old gods retired. And we will ask ourselves, in a world that still knows war, is Neit truly dead? Or is he just sleeping in the stone, waiting for the red wind to blow again? Stay with me. The journey is almost done. The dawn is coming, but the shadow of night is long. The fire has gone out. The hearth is cold, save for a single faint spark buried deep within the grey ash. Outside, the storm has passed. The wind has dropped to a whisper, and the first pale light of dawn is bleeding into the sky, turning the black of the night into the steel grey of the morning. It is in this quiet, liminal hour that we must conclude our journey. We have walked the path of the war god, from the northern islands to the fortress of Aileach, from the burning ships of the invasion to the bloody grass of Tuired. We have seen him live, and we have seen him die, but in mythology, and especially in the landscape of Ireland, nothing ever truly stays dead. Night has fallen. His iron armor is rusting in the earth. His terrifying wives, Nemain and Fea, no longer shriek over the armies of men. But the presence of night remains. It is woven into the very fabric of the land and the language. He has become a ghost in the landscape, a silent guardian who watches from the other world. After the second battle of Tuired, the Tuatha Dé Danann did not rule Ireland forever. Eventually, they too were defeated by the Milesians, the ancestors of the modern Irish people. But the gods did not leave. They went underground. They retreated into the Shee, the fairy mounds, the hollow hills. They became the Aos Sea, the people of the mounds. Night, as the High King of the Dead, found his place in this new subterranean order. While Lug and the Dagda might dwell in the bright halls of the Brúchna Boina, Night returned to the north. He returned to the stone roots of Aileach. It is said that the hill of Grianan is a hollow hill, a portal to the other world. Legend whispers that Night sits there still, in a hall lit not by fire, but by the glowing phosphorescence of decay and memory. He sits with his warriors, the sleepers, waiting. What are they waiting for? They are waiting for the Fiarn, the wild hunt, the moment when Ireland is in such peril that the old gods must rise again. Night is the reserve of strength that the land holds back for the end of times. He is the nuclear option of mythology. His legacy is also preserved in the words we speak, though we may not know it. The old Irish language, a treasure trove of archaic concepts, holds the memory of Night. The word Neit itself, meaning battle or wound, is a direct invocation of his name. When a poet in the medieval courts sang of a hero's night, he was not just using a metaphor. He was calling upon the god. The word for a champion, nia, is linked to him. To be a champion is to be of Neit. Every time a soldier stands his ground, every time a defender refuses to yield, they are channeling the archetype that Night established. And look at the geography. The map of Ireland is a body, and Neit is its scars. The Grianan of Aileach still stands. It has been restored, yes, but the base stones are the same ones that felt the hand of the war god. When you walk through the lintel of the gate, you are walking into his mouth. The plain of Fea in Carlo still bears the name of his hateful wife. The battlefields of Mag Tuired are still there, marked by cairns and standing stones. If you stand in those fields in Sligo, close your eyes and listen. You can almost hear the echo of the clash. You can feel the static charge of the red wind. But perhaps Neit's most profound legacy is the understanding of war that he bequeathed to the Celtic soul. He taught that war is not glorious. Luch might make it look like a dance, but Neit showed it for what it is: heavy, venomous, and tragic. He taught that victory comes with a cost: the maiming of the king, the death of the grandfather, the slaughter of kin. He embodies the tragedy of victory. This melancholic, fatalistic view of conflict permeates Irish history and literature. The idea that even in winning, we lose something of ourselves. In the Christian era, Neit was demonized, of course. The monks who wrote down the myths tried to reduce him to a mere mortal king, or a demon of the pit. But they could not erase him. He was too deeply embedded. He became the grim giant of folklore, the bogeyman of the north. But even in this diminished form, he commands respect. He is the reminder that the wild, pagan past is never far away. It is just beneath the surface of the bog, perfectly preserved. As we finish our story, think of Neit not as a villain, nor as a savior. Think of him as a force of nature. He is the winter storm that strips the dead wood from the forest, so that new growth can emerge in the spring. He is the forest fire that clears the brush. He is the painful, brutal necessity of destruction that allows creation to happen. He is the grandfather, the builder of walls, the husband of panic, the source of the struggle. The sun has risen now. The light is grey and cold, illuminating the world with a harsh clarity. The shadows of the night have fled, but we know they will return. The wheel always turns. The peace will end. The conflict will rise, and the spirit of night will wake from his stony sleep. Until then, he watches. From the high hill of Aileach, from the pages of the ancient manuscripts, from the blood in our veins, he watches. Thank you for walking this dark and ancient path with me tonight. We have traveled through the mists of time to meet one of the most formidable and forgotten figures of mythology. If you found value in this journey, if you felt the chill of the Grianan wind and the heat of the Mag Tuired fire, please leave a like and subscribe to Hearths of Myths. We have many more stories to tell, many more gods to wake from their slumber. May your walls be strong, may your spear be sharp, and may the red wind always be at your back, never in your face. Sleep well.